Are we living in a simulation? Are aliens among us? These are some of the questions we're going to look at today. We're going to follow the science, look at multiverse to metaverse. How many dimensions are there? What are the dimensions? Are there parallel universes? Can you visit another you? What does this have to do with augmented reality, extended reality, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and all of that? Well, if you're interested, hang out, sit down, and check this out. Because today, if you don't learn something in this video, because I learned a lot doing the research, then you are one fart smeller. All right. So you want a crypto. I'm Joe. Remember, the more you crypto, the more you know. Aliens, invisible aliens really exist among us. Could they? Well, an astrobiologist, Sharman, says that she believes aliens exist and there's no two ways about it. Furthermore, she wonders, well, they'd be like you and me, made up of carbon, nitrogen. Maybe not. It's possible that they could have completely different laws of physics and everything else. She does say that it's not so much of a ghost realm, but an undiscovered creatures, probably with different biochemistry. This means that we can't study or even notice them because they are outside of our comprehension. We'll get into some of the comprehension about trying to comprehend interdimensional shifts from one dimension to another. Assuming it exists, such a shallow biosphere would probably be microscopic. Super small, quantum even, we might say. So, do we actually live in the Matrix? And if you look at some of the Elon Musk stuff and some of the other kind of whatever was going on at this time, are we actually in some sort of digital realm representing a better one than the one that we would be coming from, such as the Matrix? Or are we creating a digital realm that's better than the one we come in now, which is our theoretical reality that we're in today? What is quantum mechanics? Quantum mechanics is a branch of physics relating to the very, very, very small, right? It is a subfield of physics that describes the behavior of particles, atoms, electrons, protons, and almost everything that's itty-bitty in the molecular and submolecular realm. Classical mechanics, objects exist in space and time, right? Place, X, Y, Z coordinates. In quantum mechanics, it's more of a probability that they will be within this range, if you will. We know that we may have a trajectory, but you can't find that spot. And there's a bit of a paradox that goes along with this. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which basically, according to the quantum mechanics, the more precisely the precision of momentum of a particle is given, then less precise position you'll get. So the more precise, like the speed or whatever you get of the particle, the less likely you'll be able to figure out where it is. The more likely you are to find the position, the less likely you are to know the speed of the molecule or particle as it went. That's basically what this is trying to say right here. Terms like the position of a particle have meaning only if one specifies in a suitable experiment by which the position of a particle can be measured. So you need to lay out the parameters of the speed, how you're going to measure everything else to be able to measure these particles. So we get into string theory, and this will all come around, I guarantee you. We're trying to go really thin on a very deep topic. String theory is the idea that in theoretical physics, right? So we can't prove this, that reality is made up of an infinitesimal vibrating strings, smaller than atoms, electrons, or quarks. According to this theory, as the strings vibrate, twist, and fold, they produce effects in many tiny dimensions that humans interpret as everything from particle physics to large-scale phenomena like gravity, which is something we can't really explain. Think of it maybe like the Force. String theory has been held up as a possible theory of everything, a single framework that could unite general relativity and quantum mechanics. So when you think general relativity, that's Einstein. Quantum mechanics, that's very small physics. Two theories that underlie almost all of modern physics. While quantum mechanics does very well in describing the behavior of very small things, and general relativity works well to explain how very large things work, they don't play nicely together. And that's where string theory comes in. Albert Einstein. Might have heard of the guy. His theory of special relativity determined that the laws of physics are the same for all non-accelerating observers, and he showed that the speed of light within a vacuum is the same no matter the speed at which an observer travels. Now these are based on our universe laws of physics, right? But we'll see later that may not always be the case in a potentially theoretical, whatever, universe. As a result, he found that space and time were interwoven into a single continuum, the space-time continuum. And events that occur at the same time for one observer could occur at different times for another observer. Well, that's kind of weird. Metaverse versus multiverse. Now, this is off the Blockchain Council, and this doesn't really say too much about string theory kind of stuff, but basically it is trying to get into this. It talks about the metaverse, introduced in the snow crash, virtual world, people interact. But we know what it is. We've heard about it. It's basically, one universe in a multiverse, right? So the multiverse is a bunch of other universes within. So here's a little bit of a description. This is from the Blockchain Council between metaverse, multiverse. Metaverse, digital shared environment provides services such as working, watching movies, playing sports, and visiting the library. Multiverse, an imaginary collection of virtual worlds with different traits and features. Meta, and this is the ecosystems count. There is only one shared universe that allows users to move freely between different platforms of the metaverse, while in the multiverse, within a hypothetical pool of virtual worlds, different ecosystems exist. Now, whether they coexist and are interoperable is a different story. There is a specific order to the flow of information in the metaverse, while there is really no particular order in a multiverse, because they're more isolated universes, right? Ownership, digital assets, and experiences can be owned by users in the metaverse. In the multiverse, users cannot own assets in separate virtual worlds. And then metaverse participants are inclusive of AI, robots, human avatars, and digital avatars. And while in the multiverse, virtual worlds are only entities that make up the multiverse. Anyway, why this is important? Because it basically starts to draw out some of the fundamentals of string theory. A startling aspect of this string theory is that the Big Bang happened once, it could happen again and again. And the way that I was, through researching this, the analogy that got to me was like bubbles. So universes could float around like bubbles. They each have their own laws of physics. Two with the same or similar laws of physics could collide and coexist pretty well. However, you could have two bubbles that could collide with opposing laws of physics, where one, the entities within it would maybe just disintegrate because those laws would no longer coexist in whatever became of the new universe that formed out of that. Some of the questions that begin to ask when we want to expand humanity, where we're going, whether or not this is, some sort of a matrix thing. What type of civilization are we on the Kardashev scale? What technologies do we need to enable interstellar travel? And how do we upload our consciousness into computers? So this is basically like the sci-fi of the sci-fi. But then again, that's not far from the metaverse. So when we're just using Wikipedia, the Kardashev scale. It's basically a status scale for human evolution, I guess you could say. At the current time, humanity has not reached the Type 1 civilization status. Physicist and futurist Michio Kaku suggested that if humans increase their energy consumption at an energy rate of 3% each year, they may attain the Type 1, the lowest status, in 1 to 200 years. Type 2 in a couple thousand, and Type 3 in 100,000 to 1,000,000 years. So we on the low end of this baby. A common speculation suggests that the transition from Type 0 to Type 1 might carry a strong risk of self-destruction, since in some scenarios there would be no longer room for further expansion on the civilization's home planet. This is at the point where the Elon Musk stuff would come in, trying to get to Mars and expand our universe. And there's multiple other here, I'll put all these links in the description so you can check it out. But other civilizations scale similar to the Kardashev. We have planet mastery, information mastery, basically how well we've mastered our own planet information. And then we get to this micro-dimensional mastery, like manipulating objects, building structures, atoms and stuff. And then we also, the one that I think applies mostly to this would be the civilizational range, where we it's how far we've gone out in space, colonized Earth and its local atmosphere, or local environment, and then solar system, galaxy, universe, and so on. And that would be right here. All right, so a visual journey. So we need to understand, in order to get string theory and how all of this applies to the metaverse and extended reality and everything else, the dimensions. So for the first dimension is going to be 0 dimension. There is no x, y, z coordinate. There's just nothing. Then you have, well, on this one I guess they call that dimension 1 is a line. So here dimension 0 they have as a dot. So we can figure that out later, but you go from nothing to a dot, like an x coordinate, and then you go to the second dimension, which is a line, and that would be a plane. So third dimension, that's what we are, would be like a cube. Now when you try to interact with unlike dimensions, a second dimensional being with a third dimensional being, you would only see that sliver of the second dimensional plane as it was applied to the, it'd be like holding up a piece of paper and looking at it from the side. You would only see certain aspects. Now if you could change your perspective, you may be able to see the flat side of the plane and see more of the two-dimensional aspect, but you would not get a very coherent three-dimensional picture in that two-dimensional world. An understanding of that, it's hard to understand that step up. So 3 dimensions, that's where we are. That's our x, y, z coordinates, length, width, height. 4th dimension is now time. So once we add time, that's where we have that space, which is a dot, a line, or a 3-dimensional being, right? A sphere or something like that, to time. So now we can move. We have a history, we have a past, we have a future. We can move along that line, we can move along that plane, we can move within that sphere, or whatever. Dimensions beyond this point are imperceptible to us. It's hard for us, well, it's impossible really for us to understand this. They exist curled down in such a small subatomic state that our best efforts cannot yet detect them. The idea is that before the Big Bang, all these dimensions existed in perfect symmetry. All 4 forces of the universe, electromagnetism, gravity, and the weak and strong nuclear forces, were held together under extreme temperatures and pressures. When these conditions became unstable, the dimensions broke apart. The first 4 dimensions remain perceptible to us, while the 6th through 7th do not. Today, these hyperdimensions are so small that atoms from our world cannot slip through into them. So dimension 5, a world similar to ours. This is like the clone. It has the same beginning as our planet. That is from the Big Bang. It has the same laws of physics, but there are noticeable differences between the worlds and between the two of them. They would have evolved similar but different. So the same laws of physics would have applied, but in those 50-50 chances, let's say it was heads this time, it might be tails the next time, and then each one leading to a different path within this dimension. The 6th dimension is basically the dimensions of the 5th dimension, plus it becomes a new plane of worlds, allowing to see all possible futures, presents, and past stemming from an event like the Big Bang. So the same beginning. It's an all of the universes, planets, whatever exists, or all of the entities of this universe, they all have to have the same beginning, the Big Bang. You could go anywhere within this and meet yourself, while in the fifth dimension here, you could not. So in the fifth dimension, there could be parallel universes with multiple self-personalities of yourself. You could be a farmer, an astronaut, whatever in each of them, but you would not have the ability to meet yourself within this dimension. The sixth dimension, you could. When we get to the seventh dimension, it'd be the sixth, everything of the sixth down. Beyond this point, universes may contain new forces, or laws of physics could change. They may have different start conditions at this point. So you're no longer held to our conceptual physics at this point. So in the eighth dimension, all past futures of each universe are showcased. This dimension may stretch infinitely. All planes of the objects, even though they may be seen, there's no physical form for a being of the eighth dimension, in theory. So this would be, interacting with the eighth dimension would be very, very similar to augmented reality, similar to virtual reality, but more of an augmented reality thing, where you are in your space and time interacting with something that's not in your space and time. And then you could change it at will, with some computers and stuff like that. But that's like a vague description of that. So dimensions 9, 10, and 11, all laws of physics exist here, even the laws that do not apply to our world and which would be entirely foreign to us. Scientists do not believe that they can exist more than 11 dimensions. Now that's not necessarily true, because there's, the 12th dimension, for example, introduces a second time. So instead of just having time as a fourth dimensional item, it would also be a secondary version of time in the 12th dimension. And then 9th dimension, many civilizations could overlap and not know it. Much like, kind of like the AR stuff, where you would not see it unless you were using the app. And the same physical point, but various planes of existence, yet they don't interact, if that makes sense. No physical form, though, really. If you were a being of this, it would be, you'd be able to move freely throughout space and time. When we move to the 10th dimension, the 10th dimension is basically what's your God dimension. So you can control space and time at this point. And the 11th dimension is where membranes, I believe, would be introduced. And this is where you start to get the string theory force and a grander scale. So from transitioning from one dimension, we talked about like a piece of paper sliced through the third dimension, to higher dimension objects, a two-dimensional being would be restricted to a plane with only width and depth, but no height. If a three-dimensional object were pushed through the plane of two-dimensional being, it would only see the cross-section of its plane with what is to us an object in a third-degree extension. So I know that sounds like a lot, but this link I'll put below. You can go through and play with this and see different variations of extensional planes through the mathematical equations. If you're really into this, you can get all sorts of interactive, and it gets pretty neat, but way beyond the scope of our Metaverse to Multiverse video. So I did make a video yesterday, and I'll link that in here somewhere, about the main demographic that I believe is going to blow up the Metaverse right now is your Roblox, Fortnite, and Minecraft players. Those 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 9-year-olds, in that group. So when they get to be 20, 30, they're going to be full productive members of society, hopefully, with jobs and disposable income for the Metaverse. So what will 2030 be like, which is an estimated guess of that year frame? Human-like AI will likely become a reality. 8K virtual reality headsets will become mainstream. Brain interface devices will become mainstream. First quantum computers, 3D printed organs, SpaceX crew to Mars. let's kind of look through some more of these. Let's see, there was one. The 8K virtual headsets. VR games will have zero latency, so that's gonna start. That's what we're looking for right here. Is this zero latency? But the technology to catch up to the ideology of what virtual reality and everything else will do. And if you don't think that everyone is looking at these different variations, we're gonna step away from all of the different dimensions and everything else and look at some practical application real quick. 9 ways we use AR and VR in the International Space Station. VR control of robots. This is going to be the future. So you could have this AR, VR, extended reality. This is athletics, exercising, maintenance, training, more training. And this is the one I want to point out right here, time travel. Astronauts need to accurately perceive time and speed of objects in their environment to reliably perform tasks. And their research shows that the perception of time and space overlap, and the speed of the body's movement may affect time perception. Other factors of spaceflight can affect time perception include disrupted sleep. They test, crew members wear a head-mounted VR set, listen to instructions. Anyway, they test all their time, depth, perception, because they're moving outside, theoretically, of the universe of the people on Earth and what the space experience is. Anyway, moving on, there's a whole bunch of fun stuff in there. Extended reality. So this one right here is where it gets really funsies. Merging the real world, virtual world for the government. And beyond the whole deliver training, improved field operations, situational awareness, they are really digging into virtual reality, augmented reality. You can see some fighter pilot stuff going on here. %78% of federal technology leaders say XR is very or extremely important to meeting agencies' mission needs. 86% they will be very or extremely important by the end of 2026. Yeah, if you're not starting to grasp Veterans Affairs using 5G enabled augmented technology to help doctors analyze and manipulate large imaging files like MRIs. So now you can get in and actually look at all this stuff, check it out, do what they got to do. Bringing it to the battlefield, the Drug Enforcement Agency, the Army, digital twins. You can run against yourself. You could probably fight against yourself. Have different avatars, interactive experiences for just about any freaking thing you could think of. So, getting into the bottom of this, defining Web3, it's going to be spatial in nature. That's the point of the whole extended reality, everything else. Metaverse, multiverse, whatever you want to call it. You can see that there's a lot of string theory fundamental kind of stuff involved in the way this is evolving. Web3 versus Metaverse. Similarities, despite these differences, the Web3 and Metaverse are interrelated in many ways. They are both part of an ongoing revolution in how we interact with digital technology. Content consumption has always been a passive process configured and managed by a few large entities. But now with Web3, we're looking at decentralization and the Metaverse. They're built on blockchain architecture, enabling an unprecedented degree, of democratization and decentralization. Also, they will both use AI and make the experience more seamless. It is going to be, like the internet, only better. That's what I got. So, do aliens exist? Possibly in an alternate universe, in a tiny, tiny string, maybe possibly on a membrane, in a universe, metaverse, multiverse, somewhere far, far away, very, very close, in the past, in the future, we don't know. But what we do know is extended reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, Web3, blockchain, crypto, LT, decentralized technology, ledgers, whatever. it is going to impact our future. So if you're investing in this now and you're listening to this at this point, then you are way ahead of the curve. All right, cheers. The more you crypto, the more you know.